Hi, and thanks very much for joining me. I'm Dean the Vaping Biker, and today we're going to be trying something that's a little bit different. We've had a lot of press in the UK over the last week or so, both against and for vaping, so I wanted to break it down to find out exactly what's going on. Is the UK the all-accepting pro-vaping country it seems to be if you're from elsewhere? Well, yes and no. Let's dive into it. On August 13th, 2018, The Telegraph in their science section led with the headline, "Vaping may damage immune system and lead to lung disease, study suggests." And with that, a wide variety of media took a similar headline-catching clickbait-style tone, including the BBC, which started, "Vaping can damage vital immune system cells," and some went with "Vaping fears. E-cigarettes are more harmful than first feared, experts warn." The latter was picked up by the New York Post with a similarly shocking "Study suggests vaping is more harmful than we were led to believe" headline. Before we go any further, I have to caveat this video by saying I'm obviously not a scientist. The following is what I've researched, and I'm completely open to a conversation with someone who has the right training and credentials to discuss this one further, so comment below. But moving on, what caused the sudden public outcry after the media had seemingly been coming around to the idea of vaping was a small experimental study, and that's what they called it, led by Professor David Thickett at University of Birmingham in the UK and funded by the British Lung Foundation. The full study, published by Thorax, the scientific journal, and on the Birmingham University site, are linked below. Their study concluded that e-cigarette liquid, or ECL, was significantly more toxic to alveolar macrophage function when vaporized. What is alveolar macrophage, other than words I don't know if I'm pronouncing properly and will refer to as AMs from now on? Well, Wikipedia says AM is a type of macrophage found in the pulmonary alveolus. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but what these cells do is remove particles such as dust or microorganisms from the respiratory surfaces and assist in keeping the lungs healthy and help fight infection. Under a microscope, these AMs frequently contain granules of carbon that they've picked up from respiratory surfaces. In this picture, the dark grains are an example of that, and especially common in smokers' lungs or long-term city dwellers. The AMs play a critical role in the response to foreign substances and tissue remodeling, and are highly adaptive to their environment. Also, on the Thorax website is an editorial link below that discusses the alveolar macrophage and its origin, lifespan and use. One of the interesting aspects of that, the article highlights, is the average lifespan of an AM in a man is 81 days. Now, I couldn't find out if these cells regenerate, although they do appear to come from bone marrow. Birmingham University study concluded that e-cigarette vapor condensate was, open quotes, significantly more toxic to AMs than non-vaped e-liquid, close quotes. And here's the kicker, quote, "We caution against the widely held opinion that e-cigarettes are safe," end quote. This triggered me. Nobody has said e-cigarettes are safe. This is about harm reduction. Anyway, to understand more about how this study may be flawed, let's look a little bit deeper. To conduct the study, they used a second-generation Ego pen-style device with a 1.8 ohm coil head from Kanga. They had a 50-50 PG and VG mix with 36mg nic, as well as a nic-free option. Bought at a research centre in Milwaukee, which uses pharmaceutical-grade nic and adheres to FDA-approved manufacturing standards. And that e-liquid has also been used in animal exposure studies. They used e-liquid made for research purposes rather than that bought at a store. Based on previous papers on puffing topography highlighting the optimum puff was between 1 and 6 seconds, they used an average of a 3-second puff every 30 seconds, and this was to allow the vapor to condense between each puff and stop the device overheating. For each test, they used a fresh atomizer and pre-saturated it to ensure the unit did not dry vape. What is not discussed is how they ensured that the coil head didn't give out dry hits and remained saturated. This has been an issue in previous studies and wouldn't happen in use by a human, as they'd obviously taste a dry hit. Neither are there any pictures of the used coil heads that I could find to confirm that none of them burned out. Any numbers quoted in the study show vapor to be damaging to AM cells, although less so with the nicotine-free version. And that may well be the case. Where this study lets itself down significantly is the lack of comparison to smoking cigarettes, or even the toxicity of our own environment. As mentioned earlier, the cells can be noticeably damaged if you live in a city, and yet no comparison was made. So why, if this study doesn't give us anything substantial or in relation to environment or smoking, did it gain so much traction? Well, and this could be a tinfoil hat theory and purely my own, could it be because it was widely known that the UK Science and Technology Committee was going to be releasing its own report in the same week, and that report was generally thought to be on the side of vaping as a way to quit smoking, championing vaping as a less harmful alternative. Interesting timing in my book, and if say you were an anti-vaping lobbyist trying to discredit an upcoming paper being released, don't you think that would be ideal timing? The key here is harm reduction. We know for a fact that the tar and other elements in combustible tobacco are the root cause of many diseases. We've had the Royal College of Physicians and the Public Health England say that vaping is up to 95% less harmful due to the much lesser amount of the bad stuff that's going into our lungs. Nobody has said it's 100% safe, and the Birmingham University study seems to ignore this. As expected, the Science and Technology Committee report was released on Friday the 17th of August 2018, and as expected, their stance on vaping was that due to it being approximately 95% less harmful than smoking, the significantly lower tar and carbon monoxide levels comparative to smoking cigarettes meant their approach culminated with ultimately any judgment of risks has to take into account the risk of not adopting e-cigarettes, that is, continuing to smoke conventional cigarettes, which are substantially more harmful than e-cigarettes. Existing smokers should always be encouraged to give up all types of smoking, but if that isn't possible, they should switch to e-cigarettes as considerably less harmful alternatives. But what about the long-term effects the papers cry? Regarding long-term effects from vaping, the difficulty is that to perform adequate data collection, the subjects would be healthy non-vapers and non-smokers that have taken up vaping and continue to vape for 20 or 30 years on healthy lungs. Seeing as the vast majority of vapers are ex-smokers, there is substantial difficulty in getting that kind of information. We also know that there is a huge difference in how people vape, the level of nicotine used, as well as the regularity, the devices, and a plethora of other aspects that make it challenging to generate accurate real-world data. Another popular argument is that, well, we didn't find out that smoking was bad for us for many years. Well, that too simply isn't accurate. In 1956, Richard Dole and Bradford Hill released a study following their 1954 paper showing the link to smoking and mortality, and that was so important the British Medical Journal reprinted that first page recently in the last couple of years. The Royal College of Physicians, who have told us that vaping is 95% safer, were also giving recommendations to the government about restrictions to cigarettes back in 1962. And even earlier, in 1957, the Medical Research Council found there was a link between smoking and lung cancer, as they put it, a direct cause and effect. So tell me again that we didn't know about the negative effects of tobacco. These studies were not all, quote, long-term, end quote, either, and the effects were recognised within a matter of a few years. And that was way before we had the technology to identify things damaging to health way earlier that we have now. The recent Science and Technology report also recommended, amongst other things, the government should maintain its planned annual evidence review on e-cigarettes, as well as support long-term research, which I think we can all get behind as vapers and completely agree with. A medically licensed e-cigarette could assist smoking cessation efforts and allow claims to be made regarding their harm reduction relative to conventional smoking. Personally, I don't agree wholeheartedly with offering e-cigarettes on prescription. However, if it's purely to substantiate the positive numbers compared to smoking and allow us to give those figures, that has to be a good thing. The committee also said many businesses, public transport providers and owners of other public places do not allow e-cigarettes in the same way they prohibit conventional smoking. There is no public health rationale for treating the use of the two products the same. This caused obviously a number of people to think it should be fine to vape on buses and trains, for example. And again, this is something that I don't really personally agree with. Even though secondhand vapor doesn't have any negative effects, at least not that have been able to be tested, the public shouldn't be subjected to it if they don't want to be. I do feel that in other public places such as pubs and restaurants, it should be entirely at the discretion of the owners if they allow vaping in their premises. The committee also said the current regulations that mean the limit on strength means some users will have to puff harder to get the nicotine they're needing, which may put off heavy smokers from changing. I think we already know that. But they also said concerning the tank restriction, currently it does not seem to be founded on any scientific rationale. Regarding health claims that are not allowed to be conveyed to the public, they said the ban on claims of health benefits of switching to e-cigarettes from conventional cigarettes means that some who might switch are not getting that message. This is obvious stuff. I mean, you know, we know this. Another aspect they covered was taxation. They said taxation should encourage the least harmful consumption, therefore e-cigarettes should remain the least taxed and conventional cigarettes the most, with heat not burn products somewhere in between. More studies have to be provided on that, and I would discuss that on a separate video if that should be needed. Finally, the Science and Technology Committee said the government should conduct a review of regulations on e-cigarettes and novel tobacco products which are currently applied under EU legislation to identify scope for change post-Brexit. Now, I think that's something that we as vapers can absolutely get behind. We do want to see change post-Brexit if we possibly can. This report, more so than anything else, highlights that we're not about eradicating all harm. It's always going to be best to give up smoking and vaping completely. We have enough crap going into our lungs from living in cities, pollution and whatever else is perfectly legal but affects us negatively. Why add to it? However, there are plenty of us there that couldn't give up smoking, or we just didn't want to. We enjoyed smoking, and surely as adults in the free world we should be allowed to make our own decisions about what we put into our bodies. We should be free to choose the less harmful alternative if one is available. The final fact blast is that according to the National Archives in 2015-2016 there were 474,000 hospital admissions attributable to smoking, and in 2015 there were 79,000 deaths attributable to smoking. 16% of the UK's deaths were because of tobacco. Looking at America, according to the CDC, cigarette smoking is responsible for more than 480,000 deaths per year, and if smoking continues at the current rate amongst the US youth, 5.6 million Americans younger than 18 are expected to die prematurely from smoking-related illness. This represents 1 in every 13 Americans aged 17 or younger alive today, and that is truly terrifying. So, to finish up, in just the USA and the UK, there are over 550,000 deaths each year directly related to smoking cigarettes, and based on the studies we have from the last 10 years, we could potentially reduce that by 522,000. Why the hell are we still fighting? We want to start saving lives. If the long-term studies that people are crying out for aren't available for another 10 or 20 years, that's millions of unnecessary deaths in the hands of anti-vaping lobbyists and governments that refuse to see modern scientific data. It's the responsibility of vapers to present vaping in good light. We have to share positive factual studies, much like the Science and Technology one, on our social media. And also, you know, we have to educate people. We have to teach people why we're doing this. Without the general public knowing the facts, they will always see vaping as the same as smoking. And without public support, the lawmakers in all of our countries will continue to be misguided and uneducated and allow the unnecessary deaths of millions of people worldwide. Don't wait for others to do the work for you. As I said at the start, all the links will be down below. I've been Dean the Vaping Biker, and thanks so much for watching, and please do share this video, smash that like button if it's been remotely helpful. I know it's been very factual, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon. Have a large